Welcome to another episode of Speaking from User Experience. I'm Phillipe Charles, your host, and I'm joined once again by Darrien Staton and Steve Maxson. If you've been listening, you already know who these guys are. If you haven't, Darrien is our lead UX UI designer. He's passionate about solving problems through clean and minimal design. Steve is our senior UX UI designer, and he believes that UX design has the power to influence lives and behaviors in significant ways. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about something that actually comes up a lot, not just in UX design, but even sometimes in marketing and in other areas. It's traditional. I'm sorry, not traditional. Steve already. I already have a. I've already started in the wrong place.
All right.
Established design patterns versus
Yes.
being innovative. And at some point, it may seem like these are in opposition to one another, and certainly I'm going to rely on both Darrien and Steve to play that up a little bit and talk about that. But hopefully, at the end of this, you'll understand that there's a time and a place for everything. So, the first question that I have for these two gentlemen is: when it comes to product design, is it better to be innovative or stick to established design patterns? Darrien, talk to me about innovation.
Well, as they all know, or both Philippe and Steve know, I love innovation, right? I think innovation is fine. I think innovation is good. It's just under the right circumstances. And I don't even think it's innovation versus established patterns. I think it's a matter of combining it, right? You should combine innovation with established patterns. Whatever you choose should lead to improvement of the user experience. I think it's a fine line, right? It's a fine line you want to walk between innovation and this established patterns. A lot of people think they're different, but I'm hoping by the time we get through this, from my perspective, you're going to learn that they're the same, and innovation and established patterns work together. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, Steve,
I'm
I'm going to
gonna
ask
see what
you
Steve got.
about established design patterns. But before you answer, can you tell me why what I said about traditional was a no-no? Because I know I made a mistake when I said traditional.
Yeah. Well, traditional, I think, has a inherent negative connotation associated with it, where it seems to imply it's an old way of thinking, something that isn't. It's archaic. It's obsolete in some ways. Versus innovation, I think a lot of companies. One of their core pillars that they always claim to be about is innovation, and so it has a more positive context to it. So I think that just the wording and framing the conversation in the appropriate way, which you failed to do in the intro, is important. But it's just that's the main thing. It's just like you're creating a first impression here on how people are going to be viewing this, and I feel it's very important, just from a psychological standpoint, to get people to look at it as two like neutral items. And then Darrien and I can start bashing each other on basically. Well, I'm just going to prove why Darren's wrong. Essentially, is what is going to happen over the course of the
Okay,
next
so
30 minutes.
and I will say that Steve told me not to say traditional. I said I was not going to say traditional, and then the first thing I said was traditional. Okay, so Steve, give me the same question, innovation versus established design patterns, and make the argument for the established design patterns.
Yeah. So established design patterns, like just as as that says, we're going off of what people are expecting to have happen because they're established. And that is a core principle of what good UX design is when a user is about to interact with something, making sure that what they get as a result of that interaction is what they expect. When you do something that goes against their expectations, you are potentially going down a hole that's leading to a bad user experience. So that's the basis of my argument against innovation. But where Darrien and I do align on is I do think there is a place for innovation. I am not going to say that you should not ever do it, but I think where Darren and I differ greatly is I believe is where he feels it should be a lot more common, a lot more prevalent across a variety of different use cases, where I feel it's more of something that should be done only when absolutely necessary and where it can enhance or improve the user experience. Innovation for the sake of innovation is not good enough reason to
Yeah,
do
and
it.
I agree where Steve says that me and him stand. I think that's a good synopsis of that. And I think, in my opinion, I think Steve's standpoint and a lot of people's standpoint on innovation, right? It comes from that fear that they believe highly innovative and new concepts can be confusing, they can be hard to navigate, and they can be frustrating and go against the users. But I would argue, right, if you're using established design patterns and frameworks and you're, for lack of better words, doing your job as a UX designer, right? Then that product, no matter how innovative it is, should have somewhat of a good user experience, right? It's part of it, in my opinion, the user experience and the innovation, right? It's not, they're not two separate things, and I think that's where I believe people today are not really focused on innovation, right? They're worried that it's going to ruin the user experience. But I will argue if you're doing it correctly, it should lead
Okay,
to
so
innovation.
you're saying that innovation and user experience go hand in hand, and innovation should be a welcomed part of the process throughout the entire design process. Okay, so then what are
Correct.
your hesitations about not doing that, or what are your hesitations about focusing too much on not traditional but established design patterns? I
You
said
keep
not
saying it. You
traditional,
keep bringing it up.
established design patterns.
Well, yeah, I can go with that. Yeah, we can get away with traditional or Steve's old way of thinking, design patterns. I'm fine with that.
Sorry,
Um,
Steve.
so people forget, right? People forget UX is not just patterns. It's not just rules, structure, right? We all understand accessibility and usability are important, but people forget, right? When they talk about the three circles or the three parts of UX design, right? Empathy, but more I'm going to talk about emotional design is a big part of that, right? If Don Norman, which is someone's very prevalent in the UX community, right, wrote a book, Emotional Design. He talks about emotional design a lot and things like that. But I'm gonna give you like a quick summary of my points with that, right? It's three things you really expect from your users, right? A visceral emotion or response, a behavioral response, and a reflective response,
Can
right?
you say?
So
I'm
when
sorry. Can you
you
say that one more
create
time?
or
Can you say
build,
what those three things are one more time?
yeah, it's visceral, behavioral, and reflective, right? So when you're creating a product and your users using it right, they should get a visceral response, right? That's that gut feeling. That's that first impact. That's like, wow, like how does this make me feel immediately, right? And then behavioral, which will play into usability and accessibility, is right. How am I using this to solve the problem that I have or the goal that I'm trying to get to, right? What behaviors? How am I interacting with this product, right? And then you got reflective. How did this make me feel after using it? Did I like it? Did it make me get into my goal harder or accomplish, right? But it's all about those emotional feelings and responses that we're expecting from the users, right? That's part of design, which that's part of innovation, right? That's what leads to innovation. When you get to innovation by focusing on humanism, right, or focusing on the person, the user, the emotional side of design, right? That's that creativity side. That's part of innovation. And that's what leads to innovation. So, as a designer, as a person working on a product or designing something new, right? The idea that if you only stick to established practices, right, that are coincidentally done by bigger companies who are innovators, right? We have the Apples, we have the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Facebooks, the Googles. They're the ones helping to establish these design patterns by continuously innovating, making mistakes, and then saying, hey, these are things users don't like. I'm in design. These are patterns you should use to help build better products, right? But my problem is when that's good, and we have these rules and patterns set over established research over time, but if you do that, you become stuck in a loop of collaboration, right? You're just copying what other companies do and changing the color or style, right? That's not innovation. That's not just, that's just a static structure that everyone's doing, right? You want your product to stand out. You want to wow your customer engagement. You want to show that you're constantly thinking of them, right? So if you're constantly thinking of them, you're going to constantly innovate. Innovation doesn't have to be disruptive, right? You don't have to be like Mark Zuckerberg or those. It can be gradual, right? You might say, and it's something me, Steve, have done in projects here, right? You might have a product where you're like, traditionally the user does this, but if we add a chat box, right? This might be useful for users who don't want to fill out long form information, right? And that chatbot might involve to you doing VR, AR, something very, new technology and add into it. But from your audience side, they're going to see as innovation. So
Look at this. Look at this guy over here. He's using my own designs and trying to use them against me.
that's my opinion.
Where I've done innovation. But like to your point though, that's the basis of my argument is, you talked about the emotional responses, and I do think that there is a place for that in specific industries like art, or when you get into film, or we were even looking at something earlier this week. It was like a hot sauce, which is more of like, in order for hot sauces to differentiate each other, sometimes they got to go off and do wild things with their branding, and because like that's what that market really expects or gravitates to. Is like sometimes people buy things just for the image, or it's like a lifestyle brand. Where I think Darren and I differ though is like, what happens if you're building like for an example, like an e-commerce store? You're doing something to say like something like Target or something like that, right? Do you need to create an emotional response then, or like if you're going so hard for that emotional response, like I think the focus needs to be on how do I get the user from when they come into my site to the point where they're buying the product. And like that's where I don't know that the emotional response is necessarily needed across all industries. Some industries, like I said, yes, like if you're an artist and you're trying to sell your work online, you might want to make a big point that you're different, you're unique from everyone out there. But not everyone falls in that category. There's a lot of boring stuff out there, but we all need it, right? There's tons of stuff like that falls into that, and you don't need to separate yourself and be like, I do things differently from everyone else. You can follow the established design conventions that are out there and be highly successful.
You know what?
For it.
Like, before I go to the next question, I do like what Steve just said. I also like what you said, Darren. But the thing that you did share that hot sauce example, and when I had seen that, I was like, this really works. And I was like, I was trying to think of what really works about this. And I think it's some of what Steve said, sort of the whether it's a lifestyle brand or sometimes consumer products, where you need to make a quick impact, an impact very quickly. Like I might not ever go back to that website, but it's memorable. So as a one-time thing where I don't have to engage with the website in any way, I thought it was fine. But I do see like other scenarios where I might need to engage more. Like I was thinking of like the people that bring in planes. Like you want them to have this. It's very important to get people where they need to get to. And if I start like dancing and while I'm doing the bringing in the planes and doing all these pop lock and stuff because it's innovative, I might not get people to where they want to go. Do you see the metaphor? I see Steve's face. That's a fantastic
I don't see
metaphor.
the metaphor.
That is a fantastic metaphor.
I'm not gonna lie, you lost me. I was like,
that is
what?
A
I don't know.
fantastic metaphor that I just came up with on the fly. But but still, it is an amazing metaphor. Think about it. You got to navigate people to where they want to go, so that you actions that you want happen, and that a catastrophe or something negative does not happen. But if I start changing up the way that I navigate because it's creative, I might not get the planes to where they need to go. Does that make sense? Okay.
But see,
yeah, okay, I follow you now. Okay, so it could be more entertaining, and it's more original, right? But like, yeah, if people, the pilots, the ones that actually have to follow the directions that you're trying to give, if they can't like understand it that well because you're trying to be innovative, then you potentially wind up with like, $2 million, several
want to
million
say that
dollar
I'm sorry
jets
for the
like
I'm
hitting
But
sorry
that's
for
Disney.
the
the thing.
people who are only listening to this and not watching this because I just pop locked and you're not going to see that. Anyways, go ahead, Darren.
Oh,
uh,
that.
but
Oh.
that's what I'm saying. That's the part you keep saying, right? You keep saying we change the navigation up or we add creativity, right? Why does it have to be either or, right? What I'm trying to say, right? Basically, you use established UX design patterns as your base structure. Then you add your personality, your wow factors, and your personalization to the experience, which will lead to a more innovative and gradually better product. Great example. I'm a food connoisseur, so and stuff like that, and Chick-fil-A is one of the places I like. So Chick-fil-A, I think, is a great example of innovation when it comes to their app. Right? There was a point where, especially COVID helped speed it up. Everyone wanted a food app, right? Every Taco Bell, McDonald's, everyone has a food app, right? But there's a reason only a few of them are actually good, right? At first, everyone was building basically a menu that you can order food from and go pick it up. Some didn't have delivery at all. But the thing is with Chick-fil-A, they slowly innovated. I don't think people notice if you started with Chick-fil-A when you first had the app, right? It didn't even have the option to get your food picked up right in front of you, right? It didn't have certain options, but over time, as they constantly push, right, you get to the point you can deliver, you can go pick it up. It knows when you are near their thing, so you don't have to press. At first, it starts as a button. You need to press when you're near it. Now it knows when you're near the Chick-fil-A restaurant, so it automatically shows you your options for I'm here to go inside or I'm at the drive-through. Like it's a slow process, but now they have one of the best apps for fast food restaurants and delivery service and things like that, right? But if you're not thinking about innovation and creativity, then your only goal is to make sure they get purchased. They order, they get their purchase, and they're able to pick it up in the most streamlined fashion and functional fashion using design best patterns, right? But you want to think about innovation. You want to add those what if I did this? What if I did that? Because it's all about user. You're thinking about the user when you're innovating. No one's saying innovate just to make up stuff, right? If you're a gas company or you're making a gas dashboard or something like that, you're not going to have something random like a hot chili pepper going across the screen, just because it's fun or you think it might improve their day. Like you're not going to do that. So it's innovating with the mindset that you're focused on the user
I
the
will
entire
say
time.
I will say that I think your use of the word innovation is probably the right word because I think that a lot of times what maybe we're taking this as is creativity, which is different than innovation. And I think that innovation requires creativity, but I think innovation inherently um, implies that there's a solving of a problem at the end of that creativity, where creativity is just artistic for the sake of art, and there's not necessarily a problem that you're trying to solve at the other end or something that you want the user to do. So I will say that I'm not flip-flopping here, Steve, don't worry, but I will say that the use of the word innovation does imply that there is some sort of problem solving at the end. So I see how these two things can work together. So my question is, um when is it okay then, and you've said a little bit of this, but when is it okay to break the established norms and be more innovative? And that's a question for both of you.
Okay. So I'm already on the rant. You got me heated up now. So I think innovation should begin from the start and it should be a part of the process, right? Our goal, and you just said it, as designers, is to solve problems and to innovate. Problem solving leads to innovation. Problem solving is innovation, or should be innovation, right? We build products based on users' emotional and behavior actions, and then what do? We test to see, right? Testing research is something we preach within UX design. We test to see if they work. So each version that we build of that product should get better, right? And you're reducing the risk and creating a better product for the end user each time, right? If you talk about people who only work on one app, like a startup company or someone who built the app, you're not going to build everything in the kitchen sink starting off, right? You're going to build an MVP, a minimal viable product, and start from there and just focus on the user's basic needs. And then over time, you're going to keep innovating and keep trying to make it better and better and better to try to reduce the gap between your product and the user, right? Because over time, we're people. Cultures change, people change. That means technology should change, which means it should innovate as long. So that's my thing. UX design should move along with culture, right? It shouldn't stay stagnant and behind. And the UX best practices or patterns that we talk about, they're just a structure. They're the framework to your house, right? Just like there's different housing designs and architecture and stuff like that. The framework for most of those don't really change, right? You might invent new technology and stuff how to hold it. The patterns may change slightly or move based on the technology and things that come out. But for the most part, the foundation stays strong. But everything you add on to it, right? The design, the looks, caters to different people, users, and stuff like that. It's the same thing. So UX design, it moves along, right? Innovation moves along. So as a designer, we should be moving and using innovation. And innovation should be a part of our process.
I gotta say, I'm really disappointed because I was really hoping to come in here and just destroy Darren and just make him crawl under the desk and start crying. But I largely agree with what he's saying here
Oh
and what
my
he
gosh,
said.
Should we
you
just
said
stop
agree?
Should we
Largely
just
agree.
stop
All
the
right,
podcast
we're not
now?
100%, right?
I've
This
never
isn't.
heard
This
this
isn't.
before from Steve.
Yeah. This is a unique feeling for me. Anyway, like one thing I guess where I do disagree on is as far as like innovation being something to consider from the beginning. That's where again it depends on the scenario. It's hard. I don't believe in like one size fits all solutions, blanket solutions, whatever you want to call it. But so it depends on the situation. But in most cases, what I would advise people or clients to do would be to stay with the established design conventions to begin with. Similar to like the example that Darren gave on Chick-fil-A just a moment ago, where they started it with something, and then as they learned, they innovated. They brought in, they started to use more of the established technology that maybe the app didn't have to begin with, like GPS. And they started to bring some more of those in order to enhance the user experience. The thing that the reason why that's the course I would take is innovation or doing things different than the established design conventions is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only is it expensive that you have to leverage potentially a new technology, in the example of the Chick-fil-A app, but you also have to invest in user testing. Design is going to take significantly longer because you're doing something that basically, as far as you're aware, no one else has done. Or maybe it might just be something that you might have seen like a one-off of it, that some one site that does something in a very niche audience, they do something, but you need to tweak it a little bit to make it work for your situation. But the point is though is that innovation comes with a cost, and that's something you need to take in mind. And when a lot of companies are trying to do MVPs, they're trying to get something done right away, and so the innovation also is going to lead to time. Because otherwise, if you don't do the put in the time for the user research, then you risk putting out a product that's going to fail. If you innovate and you don't have data to support that's going to work, that you haven't been testing it along the way, that you're going to invest all this time, you're going to put something out, it's going to fail, and then it's going to either come back. Well, hopefully it comes back and you get a chance to redesign it. Otherwise, it just may never come back. It might just be dead in the water.
Yeah, and that's funny. This may be your lucky day as well, because I agree with Steve. I think, I think.
I'm used to hearing
Oh
that
my
though.
gosh!
So,
So I think it's in the middle, right? And I'm gonna separate this into two different categories. You have a brand new product on the market or a startup, right? And then you have an established product. Both of those products, I think, when innovation becomes key, right? I think you should think about innovation starting off, because when you start just saying I'm going to just copy the standards that are out there, right, you may lead to a product that users don't want, or they why use this product when there's another one that's the same but has better enhancements and more innovative properties, right? So I think you should always keep it there, but it doesn't mean you have to act on it right away, which I think is what Steve put very well with talks of MVP and things like that. If you're a startup and you have an innovative concept, then yes. But that's where the key is. You already have an innovative concept. So now it's time to look at established practices and look, how can I take this innovative concept or product and make it user friendly and accessible? Right? That's why I said it's the same. You're no matter which way you're going,
Let's
you're
go
doing both.
a step deeper though, because we're talking about the question was like, when is it okay to break the norms? And I would imagine like there are some things in design that are pretty much better off not changing, right? Like some established principles again, but like maybe things with navigation, maybe that's the last thing that you want. I'm not saying that you can't be innovative, but that seems like an area like the way people are used to navigating the internet or an app. Some of those things are important, right? So where
Mm-hmm.
what has the least like what has the most space to be innovative without having drastic, you know, consequences, and what maybe you want to hesitate more before being innovative?
See, that's a hard question. Well, one, that's just paraphrase. It has to do with your audience. It depends on your audience, right? Let's say you got people 60 or above. You might not want to have a lot of side scrolling or a lot of like innovative like mouse jacking and stuff like that on your website. When people where like you swipe a little.
Can you explain what mouse jacking is?
Assisted scrolling. So if you scroll, it might take you down the page like smoothly by yourself. But for some people who don't know what's going on, that may scare them. They might feel like they lost control of the website or whatever that is. So you want to be careful with things like that. So that's why I said it's a very tricky question. But if you have a young audience, right, who wants something fresh and new, then that may be the way to go. So one, I think it depends on your audience, and two, I think it depends on what your goals as a company, right? If this is just a landing page and you're trying to awe people, you're trying to get them to do it based on aesthetics and visual components, then that is your moment to go all out, right? You might do something different that does break the norms, right? You might only do a page where it's just one single page. You click on it and it takes over, and now you're in the experience and you can move around and do things you normally wouldn't do, right, on the basic website where their only goal is to get information and get out. So it depends on the audience, the goals, and motivators. That's how I would say it.
Yeah, but I think Phillipe, you hit it with navigation is one thing you probably want to avoid doing crazy innovation on. Obviously, I think we've seen some innovation with like drop downs and how originally you just had a static menu where you just had all the links at the top, and then they started to have drop downs, and then each one of the set you could have different sections with like sub items underneath it, and then you had these mega drop downs where you hover over something and then you got like several columns of links and maybe like support topics and things like that. And so I think like we have seen that innovate, but then like we have to also think too though, like how like the bring when we have the mobile phones becoming more prevalent and more people are now surfing the web with that, like okay, now how does that mega menu that you have, how is that going to work on a phone? Like, and is that that's where like you have to start thinking, and then like I guess that's where innovation kind of plays like a weird kind of
Mm-hmm.
role, right? Because sometimes innovation actually requires that, because like we innovate on our technology as far as like what goes in what our phones do, and sometimes we got to scale things back so that way they're scalable both ways. Anyway, that just came to me. But the other thing I was going to say that you don't want to innovate on is if you're on maybe like a checkout process. If you have an e-commerce site, you probably don't want to go too crazy there, because at that point you've already put a lot of effort into getting the user to the point where they've added stuff to the cart, and now you're on the home stretch, right? You're at the last 10%. But if you don't get that last 10%, that user, instead of being something that you're going to make money off of, they could just leave the site. And so that's too much risk in my opinion. And but then like if you don't have even if you don't have an e-commerce site, but you're using your site to collect data from the user, so they have to fill out a contact form, and then so we can the sales team can reach out to them, like don't go too crazy in that contact form. Don't do anything that is going to make it harder just essentially don't make it harder for the user to do things. As long as you stay true to that, then you should be
Yeah,
golden.
and I think a great way to summarize that from both me and Steve points is that one, you shouldn't make the user's goal harder to reach. So whatever their goal is, you shouldn't make it harder than necessary to get there. That's basically what it boils down to, in my opinion. And three, you shouldn't make it hard for them to find what they need. So that gets back to like navigation and stuff. You can innovate and you can move things around, do layouts, but like I said, based on your audience and users, are they having a hard time trying to find what you want them to get to? So
Yeah, innovation should always make things easier for the user, and I'm happy to see or hear Darren say that based upon some of the sites that he shares with all the creatives here at CrossComm, because some of those sites definitely go against that,
So
Darren.
that's the thing, right? I don't know if Philippe was going to get into this. So I believe this. Now, this is all me. I don't know if there's any written text or things like this, right? But I think there's a boom, and you can see it through art history and different things like that, and even technology, right? There's a time in every sort of few years or so, depending on how technology moves and how things move fast, where there's a boom of I want something different. This is stagnant, or inspiration and innovation, right? And I think we are currently reaching that boom, right? Humanism, which I talked about a little earlier, or the idea of putting the user first, right? We've gotten to this point where everything's kind of utilitarian, right? Everything has its place. There's structure to everything. Everyone's website looks almost exactly the same, like round or curved edges on boxes, simple drop downs. Blue is very prevalent. Blue and white layouts. Especially if you're doing dashboards and stuff. Every company pretty much has the same almost looking dashboard, right? But the thing is, you're by doing all these design patterns and only sticking to like the structure part, you're forgetting about the empathy part, right? And that's the part people miss. A lot of people miss that. So when that happens, then you have an influx, right, of people going against that norm and doing the extreme version of what you have now. And that's what we're seeing, and that's what I've been sharing with the team and things like that, is this cry for innovation and cry for putting the user and bringing empathy back into design. So then, yes, you do end up with apps and sites that are going to the extreme, so they're lacking that accessibility and usability. And that's why I think you have to meet somewhere in the middle, right? You need both, and then you have a good product.
Yeah, and I think the word empathy can be used on both sides, to different meaning, right? Empathy in terms of
Mhm.
usability is like, am I helping the user get to where they need to get to and accomplish what they want? Empathy, on the
Mhm.
other hand, is more about, am I getting them the feeling that they want to feel, and am I showing them something different than what they've seen, that actually is empathy, but it also makes you stand out more. So the way I see this is like, when you're designing, and I'm not a designer, but when you're designing, you have to know what the purpose of everything that you're designing is. Is it to get the user to a place, or to accomplish some sort of action, or is it to be a branding tool? Is it to be an opportunity to attract, which is a little bit earlier, might be a little bit earlier in your customer journey, right? You're trying to attract them early, so you have to figure out what parts of your app or your website or whatever are meant to attract, and what parts are meant to navigate or help them accomplish a goal that's important to you. And I think maybe that's some of where I see how those two things can live together, both innovation and established design. What do you all think about that?
No, I agree. I think you summed it up very well. I feel like I've won this battle
Yeah.
today. I'm feeling pretty
Well, what
victorious right now.
what final thoughts, other than I won or I didn't win? What final thoughts? Because I think that you all are saying a lot of the same things. So, what final thoughts do you have, about your perspective, and where say one thing nice about the other person while you're doing it? How about that?
Well, I don't know nice per se, but I would say humanism, or idea of emotional design or empathy, whatever one of those three. The idea is keeping user first, right? Leads to innovation. and that innovation is a part of the UX process and design culture, right? It's something that should be kept close to your heart and done with the idea why you're using these patterns or best practices. So that'd be my ending note. Just remember, like, it's part of the process and it should help influence your decisions. Nice. I'm glad that Steve is listening to me and agrees with my opinion on this topic. Uh, your turn, Steve.
Like 10% agree, maybe. I guess my closing note is that I'm not. I just wanted to be clear that I'm not 100% against innovation. I just think it needs to be. You need to think carefully about where to use it, where to apply it in whatever it is you might be working on, and understand that with innovation comes risk, comes cost, and you need to be prepared to accept that. Make sure that you have buy-in from all the powers that be. That they understand that too, but you're doing it with the idea of improving the user experience and taking that user-centric approach, and that you have a unique problem that needs this innovative solution to it in order to deliver the experience that you want for your
Yeah.
users. That's the crux of where I guess where I stand
and one nice thing about Darren.
on the
Yeah.
topic. Oh, that's right. I was hoping you forgot about that. Darren has Darren. I really like Darren's car collection. I'm very envious
Oh.
of his Mazda Miata.
You know, it's funny that you say that. Just to end note, I would say if you don't remember anything about this, think of it like cars, right? All cars, when you're manufacturing and designing them, have all the same regulations and hazard standards and all emission standards and all that. They all have to do the thing. They all gotta have, move and do the things that are necessary, which is why every car practically does the same thing. They get you to point A to point B. But right, when it comes to innovation and meeting the needs of the user, each car is different, right? A Mustang, a Miata serves a different purpose than a crossover or someone who wants something bigger to feel safe. Some have different features to meet the different needs of users. So it's the same thing, right? Innovation is a part of the process, and that's what leads to higher engagement, in my opinion, and happier users.
And then one thing I'll relate to that it came to me as we were discussing today is a case where innovation is absolutely vital. Is actually within the software that Darren and I use, which could be a total podcast itself. But a lot of people are familiar with Adobe and Photoshop, Illustrator. And then XD is their UX tool. They've kind of been more or less eclipsed by other companies as far as their UX offering. Photoshop is still king, not arguing that. But the reason why is because they were not innovating. And so what happened like about 5 years ago or so, Sketch came along, small company. They're kind of spread out throughout the world, actually. They have a diverse team and where they're located and everything. And they came along and they innovated and they made a really great product. And then that became king for UX designers for a long time. Then they got stagnant and Figma came along and then they started innovating and now they've become and they are currently the industry standard. But I guess that's just a point. Like this has all occurred just in the past 5 years or so. And it shows that you need to get in some industries, innovation is vital or you will you can easily just nosedive and then you can fall below. Like in my opinion, and this is just my opinion alone, but Adobe is now number 3 on that list. Sketch is above them, and Figma's at the top. And so, just it's very quickly, like what can happen if you do not innovate.
Agreed.
So I like those two examples, cars, and I like the example of UX software. And so what I guess where I'll end things and sort of my takeaways that I hear you all saying, and again hear you agreeing more than disagreeing, is that there's a time and a place. Innovation is helpful in keeping people engaged and interested in your product, but to do it right, it requires testing, it requires money, and not everybody has the resources to innovate and actually without guessing, right? And then on the other hand, sticking to established design principles helps you know that you have something in place that a person can use without having to test it because it's already been pre-tested for you. And so a combination of both then allows you to both allow somebody to use your product but also stay ahead of competition. That's what I'm saying. That's my thank you.
Well said. You said what we.
Yeah, he just summed up everything I said. So that was like
No, no,
perfect.
no. I wouldn't say some to everything you said, but yes, both. Yes,
Okay,
it is
so
both. You need
that's
both.
where we're gonna end things. I think that we've come together in this kumbaya moment, and we're more alike than we are different. And so let's end with that. This has been Speaking from User Experience. Thanks again to Darren and Steve. I'm Phillipe, and we are signing off.